Welcome to the Action Network studio in New York City. I'm Maria Marino, and this is Green Dot Daily. We come to you live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app. Coming up on the show, we will get you ready for tonight's playoff games in the NBA, including the Warriors trying to get even with the Lakers. Plus, in baseball, is there reason to buy the Cubs right now? Anthony Dabbundo says yes, so we'll talk to him. And we'll have some NHL player props for you as well. But we do want to address some breaking news in the sports betting space. So we have Darren Ravel here now, and you just published a story on the Iowa baseball team being investigated by the state's gaming commission. Please fill us in.
Hi, Maria. This is basically what we know. We know that the Racing and Gaming Commission in Iowa has acknowledged today that they are launching an investigation looking into the Iowa baseball team. Now, on Friday, Iowa had just issued a statement that said that they were withholding some players from the games. We didn't know how long. Looks like 4 players at least have been withheld. But they only said for possible NCAA violations. They didn't say anything else. We asked them, is it for gambling? Because one reporter had hinted it indeed was. They did not comment. So that's why we had to wait until 1:30 today when the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission acknowledged that there was indeed an investigation. This obviously comes off the heels of the Alabama baseball betting scandal, where you essentially had Brad Bohannon, the coach, confirmed to be on the phone with a bettor at Great American Ballpark, making bets against Alabama, who was playing LSU, and then he was subsequently fired. We asked the question kind of rhetorically, is baseball kind of a sneaky sport here because no one pays attention to it? And there are usually low limits, but that really tends to be for mobile. Once you get to retail and someone has a whole bunch of cash in their hand, they go up to a teller, those low level bets, then change. And so we asked that, and now is there perhaps another thing going on here?
And it sounds like at this stage of the story, it is developing. So we do not know for certain if there is a link here with.
I mean, what we do know is that we have been told, even to this point, that the Alabama scandal has not involved players. We're not talking about players here. And so this is where this might cross over. Again, this is an investigation. We don't want to say these guys are guilty. There are 4 players. 2 of the players are actually like regular players. They have Keaton Anthony, who's an infielder. Anthony is their on-base percentage, batting average, slugging percentage, and OPS leader. So he's significant. He's an infielder. And then there's another guy named Jacob Henderson, who's a relief pitcher who last pitched on May 2nd. So then there's 2 others, including one who has not played a game this season. So we just don't know. The first thing you do when you hear something like that is to look into whether there seems to be anything nefarious, right? Like, can you look into, that's what we did with the LSU game, which is kind of strange because the information was that Luke Holman, who was the star of the Alabama, the best pitcher, was getting scratched. Now LSU was up 8-1, and Alabama almost came back to win. So, the tip almost didn't turn out to be that great. So we went down and looked at all of Iowa's games. Iowa's a tremendous team. They're 34-12. They've been ranked in the top 25 almost all year. There was one game against Illinois State on March 28th that you could say they shouldn't have lost, right? But like, it's baseball. I mean, that's the one game where there was a team that had under 500, but all their other losses are against other great teams. Sam Houston State, Maryland, Texas Tech, all those are. So there's nothing that looks like it's sticking out like a sore thumb at this point.
Right. And in the case of Alabama baseball, we didn't know initially. And then as the news continued to transpire, we did indeed find out that there was some nefarious things taking place, as you mentioned. What I do wonder is, something that we touched on last week when you and I discussed Alabama baseball. On one hand, it's great that we have regulation and that we are monitoring these things so that we can make sure that the integrity of sport is being upheld. Now, you were, on the flip side of that, worried about potentially some overreaction or maybe some, playing it extra safe. Do we think, based on what we know so far, is that all that's happening right now?
Yeah, I guess we just don't have enough details at this point. And yes, I mean, an NCAA violation could be something completely different. I think probably in light of what's happened for the Alabama case, maybe they are being a little bit more cautious. But, an NCAA violation can be almost anything. So I think perhaps it's because it's so close to Alabama. But the fact that the Gaming Commission's involved and has confirmed that there's an investigation, seems like they have enough that they're at least starting to look into it.
Well, we will be awaiting the results of that investigation, and we will be following you, Darren, for the updates. Thanks so much for stopping by Green Dot Daily.
You got it.
Tatum. Smart. Did not get it off in time, it appeared.
I guess I got to demand the ball a little bit more.
Boy, Jokic, a little bit of contact. That potentially could get dangerous.
I thought the league's supposed to protect us.
They deemed Nikola doing something that was excessive, I guess, and they gave him the tech, but I still don't really understand it.
I think the fans, the owner of the Suns, made any difference.
I don't give a shit.
Classic response there by Mike Malone. What a Sunday it was in the NBA playoffs as Philly and Phoenix both clawed their way to wins. And here are the updated series prices. Nuggets favored at -165 and Celtics favored at -300 as we say hello to Chris Raybon. So Raybon, how are you feeling about both of these series? And we'll start with the Celtics and Sixers.
Yeah, so I know the Celtics just had a pretty ugly last couple of possessions in that loss to Philly, but the more I look at the Celtics, the more they look like the best team remaining in this playoff field. A lot of their errors, I think, are correctable. I mean, you talk about just doubling off a guy you weren't supposed to double off. You talk about just getting a possession, started and action started a half second too late. These are things that they can kind of correct, but, from a talent perspective, from a rotation perspective, no one's really a net negative on defense for them. And they're rendering, parts of Philly rotation unplayable at any given point, whether it's Tucker, whether it's Gorgie Nang. So, I really think that Boston shouldn't be worried. But at the same time, if you look at these two series prices, I think the Nuggets offer more value if you like the favorites because, the Nuggets are pretty much half, what Boston is right now in terms of the odds. And, this team going back home, their point differential at home was about 13 points better than it was on the road. So, we just saw Denver lose 2 road games in which Booker, KD, especially in that last game, balled out. And, Booker's been just keeping Phoenix afloat, but it's going to look a little different when, they go back to Denver. And I would bet that ends with Denver up 3-2, and it's going to be tougher for Phoenix. So I like the value on Denver, but overall, going forward long term, I don't think Boston's in a ton of trouble. And that's why you do see those series prices where they are.
I agree. I do feel like there are some parallels between the Nuggets and the Celtics where they both kind of seem like they are more in control of the series despite some of the recent losses. But that's a really good point about the price. If you're going to bet one of them, the Nuggets are going to give you some more value. So let's get into tonight's games. The Knicks, the Heat. This has been interesting. What are your thoughts there?
So I think the first thing people should know about these two games tonight, we've seen teams that are down 2-1 in game 4, no matter whether they're the underdog or the favorite, they've been pretty money from round 2 on when you get tighter matchups, in these series. And so I'm going all the way back to 2005, a team down 2-1 in game 4, 61 and 39 straight up and 60 and 38 with 2 pushes against the spread. So covering about 61% of the time. It's the same for favorites and underdogs. But that being said, we'll get to Lakers Warriors in a minute. But when it comes to Knicks Heat, it's tough to trust the Knicks. Number one, all these ankle injuries. I mean, how healthy is Brunson? How healthy is Randall? Now, Emmanuel quickly is doubtful with the ankle as well. But also, you look at Miami, they're 7-1 against the spread this postseason, 6-0 in the last 6 games. They keep kind of, exceeding expectations. So tough to bet against the Heat at this point in time.
Tough to bet against the Heat and tough to trust the Knicks right now. So I totally am with you there. Lakers, Warriors, do you have a pick?
Yeah, I like the Warriors in this game. I know they've been struggling on the road a lot, but this is not a true road game. I mean, it's interstate. We saw them win a couple of road games against Sacramento in these very playoffs, another interstate rival. But this, just going back under Steve Kerr, this has been what the Warriors do. They tend to make adjustments and they tend to bounce back in these spots. They're 25-14 against the spread, coming off a loss in the postseason under Steve Kerr, and they cover in those games by an average of over 5 points. 8-1 in their last 9 against the spread, coming off a loss in the playoffs. And when it's a double-digit loss, 71%, 15-6 against the spread all time. So this is a good spot for Golden State. You also got Scott Foster reffing this game, and he's been known as the extender in some circles. And, when you looked at the data, it's a small sample, but teams down 2-1 are 12-8 against the spread. So that's 60% since 2010. When Foster is reffing game 4. So that, kind of the Lakers have been doubling up the Warriors in free throw disparity. They're still the favorite to have more free throws, just the way they play. But I would bet that disparity is a little bit less tonight with Foster reffing.
I could be wrong, but I think Foster always also his trend is like tending to favor the home team a little bit too. So you got to be careful. But that being said, go on. What were you going to say?
Oh, no. I'm saying, he's going to favor the home team in certain spots. But I think if you look more, there's a lot of noise in referee data. But I think if you look at more, what he's been known to do is, anytime the NBA, it looks like it's in their interest for a series to go longer, he tends to get the call, and these things tend to even out. So, yes, and, the Lakers are at home. But, coming off their big home win in Game 3, this would be the spot we would expect Golden State to now adjust to the adjustments. I think Curry, if they put Austin Reeves on Curry last game and Vanderbilt on Draymond to kind of limit that, if they switch the pick and roll, they wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Curry's just, he's just going to have to go off on Reeves ISO in this spot if that's what they keep doing. And we know he can because he's been quiet this series. He's averaging only 23.3 per game, where he had 30 in 5 of the first 7 in this postseason and half of the games in last year's postseason run. So I think we get a big game from Curry. I think the calls aren't as much in favor of the Lakers as they were in the previous game. And I think the Warriors find a way to tie the series up.
Again, trends are only trends, but you also have the whole idea of Anthony Davis sort of every other game seems to be superhuman. Plus, I mean, the Dubs, they just cannot go down 3-1. This is really a must win for them. So I like your pick, Raybon. I like you coming on Green Dot Daily. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Maria.
Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. To MLB now as we bring in our expert, Anthony Dabbundo, and we will get a pick from you in a moment for today's games. But wanted to ask you about the Cubs. They called up their top prospect, Matt Mervis, on Friday. Won 2 out of 3 against Miami over the weekend. What's your outlook on the Cubs?
Yeah, the Cubs are really hard to figure out coming into the season because they had a lot of kind of mix and match pieces. They didn't really go out and sign a true superstar in free agency, but they made some smart additions. Dansby Swanson improved the shortstop position. He's been excellent defensively as well. Cody Bellinger at center field, a bit of a reclamation project. The former MVP had been awful with the Dodgers the last couple of years. He's been excellent at the plate for them, and they've gotten a couple of small breakouts from guys like Nico Horner and Patrick Wisdom from a contact and power perspective. So this lineup all of a sudden is producing at a top 10 rate when you look at their expected weighted on base average. So the underlying metrics really like this offense, and they think they've been producing pretty well. And they've done a solid job in pitching development as well. Guys like Justin Steele, who have a sub-2 ERA right now and have pitched to that level. Excellent in inducing weak contact. Drew Smiley, someone who most had pretty much written off for his career, has turned into a pretty capable back-end starter as well. So the pitching development, Hayden Wesneski as well, another solid start yesterday, has been really impressive. And they're top 10 in pitching expected weighted on base average. So this is a top 10 team thus far based on some of the metrics. You look at the record, right around 500, not that impressive, but their Pythagorean win total, which looks at run differential, says that they actually have played the best baseball in this division. Their Pythagorean wins 22-12. They've just been really bad in close games. One reason for that, they've had a lot of blown saves. They don't really have a true closer right now. They're sorting through the bullpen, trying to figure out who their best arms are. I have faith they'll figure that out. And if there's one thing you can easily buy in the middle of the season, it is a bullpen, and try to improve that way. So I think there's reason for them to go out and maybe make a couple additions to improve that bullpen. Calling up Mervis fills a hole in the lineup. They were getting nothing from their first baseman position. Mervis hitting 280 in AAA with a ton of power, good on base skills. So I think there's a lot to like about this Cubs team. And really in the Central, the Cardinals are a mess. I don't think it's getting any better without them solving their pitching problems. As good as their lineup is, they can't stop giving up runs. And the Brewers have the opposite problem in that their offense is bottom 10 in expected WOBA. Their pitching, which is normally elite, has some injuries they're dealing with. Aaron Ashby hasn't pitched this season. Brandon Woodruff's going to miss some more time. So there are some real question marks at the top of this division. I like the Pirates and what they're doing, but I don't think they'll sustain their hot start. We're already seeing them regress a little bit. So I'm going to roll with the Cubs to win the Central.
Wow. I did hear the word Pythagorean in there. Pythagorean wins. Is that like the theorem?
Yeah, basically. It's a metric that, looks at runs scored and runs against, and then says, well, based on the average baseball game, what should your record be? In the theory that, runs scored and runs against are more predictive than win-loss, which they generally are. It's become a little bit more noisy because of, position players pitching and blowouts and stuff like that. But generally speaking, it's more predictive than actual record.
Got it. Okay, so Cubs to win the Central. I buy it. As for the Monday slate, what is your pick for us?
Yeah, not a great baseball slate. We do have 11 games, but not a ton jumped off the board except for one thing, which was Houston on the money line at -125. Hunter Brown against Patrick Sandoval. Based on the pitching plus projected ERA for the rest of the season, Hunter Brown is more than a half run better than Sandoval. His ERA projects around 3.7, which is an above average major league starter. Sandoval sitting down at 4.25. And I have major concerns about Sandoval here. His strikeout minus walk rate is a career worst, 6.3%, whereas Brown has really put up some impressive numbers, 15.7% strikeout minus walk rate. Does have command issues at times, but is striking out 25% of hitters, so a good number for Brown. Also, both lineup splits favor the Astros here. Astros are much better against left-handed pitching. The Angels are much better against left-handed pitching as well. The Angels get to see a righty today, so they're in their worst split. They have a lot of righties in that lineup. So with a better lineup and a better starter, I like the Astros here closer to a pick'em. So -125, I'd play it up to -130 with the Stros on the road tonight at 9:30.
Definitely seems like a favorable spot for Houston. Now, Anthony, you are also an authority, shall we say, on soccer. So while we have you here, let's get a preview of the Champions League semifinals. We've got Real Madrid against Manchester City on Tuesday at 3 Eastern, and then Wednesday, same time, AC Milan taking on Inter Milan. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts on that Tuesday match to start?
Yeah, Tuesday's the headliner. Manchester City is the favorite to win the Premier League. They're now the favorite to win the Champions League. They're the favorites to win the FA Cup. They could become the first English team to win the treble, all three trophies, in this century. Has not happened since the late 90s with Manchester United. So a lot of pressure on City here. Real Madrid won this matchup last season in the semifinals with an historic late comeback. They were not the better team for the majority of this match, those two legs. We discussed this a lot on Wonder Goal. We kind of went in depth, BJ Cunningham and I. It's really hard to project because coming in, we've been saying that Madrid has ridden their luck in the Champions League for the last year and a half. And been very fortunate. But this year, they've made some improvements, some tactical tweaks. some adjustments. They've gotten a little younger, and they've actually been more deserving this year and actually have better underlying numbers. So even though City is head and shoulders the best team in the world right now, they've won 11 straight in the league, rather. They just thrashed Arsenal, thrashed Liverpool, rolled Leipzig, and Bayern Munich. They are a little bit inflated here, and I actually show a little bit of value on Real Madrid at home in the first leg, catching about a quarter of a goal. If it gets to a half, I would bet it on Real Madrid. That's just how high the market is on City now. City with Haaland up top has become a really dominant finishing team, which was always their one issue, which was that they would play this elite football, and then when matches would get in transition, they would struggle and sometimes lose on variance and some misfortune. But this year with Haaland, it looks like City's probably headed to the final. They are minus 300 to advance. So I do think, regardless of what happens in the first leg, I would expect City to win at home in next week's match and then advance. The other match, though, I do have a betting angle. I'm surprised to see this market close, price as close as it is. Inter Milan takes on their inner city rival. It's going to be a very fascinating time and certainly an exciting scene. One of the biggest matchups they'll ever have in the history of their rivalry. So they're going to play 2 matches in the next 6 days over in the same stadium. The home fans will switch, but it'll basically be a coin flip both games. But I think that Inter should be more of a favorite. And the reason for that is that Rafael Leao is out injured for Milan. It looks like he's going to miss the first leg. He is so huge for this team. He's pretty much the entire responsibility of getting the ball forward and up the pitch into the penalty area for the other team. He is second in the league in passes into the penalty area, second in carries into the area. He's kind of a one-man attack at times for Milan, and they've struggled when he hasn't been in the match or in good form. Otherwise, Inter has advantages pretty much everywhere else. They've had some poor finishing from their top 2 strikers, Lautaro Martinez, Romelu Lukaku. But now that they're starting to find their form again, the market's moved heavily toward Inter. Milan opened a favorite here. They're now a solid underdog in the first leg. You can find them up to minus 140 to advance here. I think this should be closer to minus 160. So I played the Inter to advance over 2 legs. So that's both matchups combined. That's my favorite bet for this round of the Champions League.
Okay, so feeling Inter as your bet, but also leaning Real Madrid, as you mentioned, to recap. Anthony Dabbundo, thanks so much. We got a little 2-for-1, baseball and soccer. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be a massive week. Amazing soccer week for sure.
Over to NHL, and right before the lone playoff game tonight, the draft lottery is at 8 Eastern. The Ducks have the highest chance of landing the number 1 pick at 18.5%, which translates to the best odds at plus 250. Then the Blue Jackets are at plus 550, so a 13.5% chance, followed by the Blackhawks at plus 650 with an 11.5% chance. As we say hello to our hockey analyst, Nick Martin, why don't you tell us why this year's draft lottery seems to be more exciting than other years in the NHL?
Yeah, so this year, first off, Connor Bedard's going to be a generational talent. Everybody's heard about this. So seeing where he goes is the most exciting part of it. But behind him, there's 5 or 6 top level prospects that would probably be going 1 or 2 any other year. This draft class is absolutely stacked. So outside of tuning in just to see where Bedard goes, it's going to be really fun to see who moves up and down those other slots compared to an average year. So yeah, it's a super exciting draft lottery night.
Okay, so even if you don't land the number 1 pick, you could get a really franchise-changing player. But one other thing I wanted to ask you about. So at BetMGM, the Coyotes are actually receiving 44.6% of the handle to win the lottery as far as bets coming in, even though they have just the 6th best odds, so a 7.5% chance to land that top pick. What's going on here?
Yeah, so what's happening here is this is the only real narrative you can bet into with this, right? They're just drawing lottery balls. So if you think one team has an edge, it's like saying you like a number at the roulette table, right? I think that's basically your only case. The argument here that people like with Arizona is that if the NHL was to ever rig this thing, I'm not saying that I think it's going to be rigged, they would likely rig it for Arizona and try to save this struggling franchise. All the logic is there, right? Bettman's tried so hard to try to save hockey in Arizona. It's just not working. And Connor Bedard could be the one thing that saves that franchise. So people are betting into the narrative that the league is going to kind of do something here to get Bedard to Arizona. So that's why we're ending up with a higher percentage of bets on the Coyotes.
Well, maybe people just want an underdog story and sort of a fairy tale turnaround for the Coyotes. Well, besides the lottery, we do have a playoff game tonight. Golden Knights Oilers Game 3. The series is tied at 1 game apiece. What's your play for that game?
Yeah, so I have 2 plays that are kind of revolving around the same narrative, that Vegas is going to spend more time playing at even strength tonight and that they're going to do better in those minutes at even strength than we saw in Game 2. They were awful in Game 2. They got fully dominated by the Oilers, and that obviously hurts their shot totals. I think that most of the time we should see Edmonton leading this game, which is still great for our shooters, but probably not spending as much time on the man advantage. If you're Vegas in this series, the number one thing you need to focus on is keeping Edmonton's incredible power play off the ice. So that helps our 2 shooters here. I like Marchessault to go over 2.5 shots. He leads the Knights in shot attempts per 60 and shots on goal per 60 in the playoffs. They've spent a ton of time trailing, and he's on the top, or I should say leading, and he's on the top line. So that hurts his usage. I think that basically this is just a really good time to get in on kind of a square look and keep riding him here. I think that we'll see his shot total rise to 3.5 by the time this series ends. So I like Marchessault. And then the less obvious one, I'm high on Shea Theodore here. I think he's a far better offensive player than he's shown so far this playoffs. He's had 12 attempts through 2 games in this series. He had 4 shots on goal in the first game. I think that plus 146 is just a pretty long number for what he can actually create at even strength. So I think going back to the well with Theodore, if the Knights play better at even strength, he's going to be part of the reason why. So I like him as a second Knights shooter.
Well, it sounds like Vegas is going to need both of those players to help out if they are going to gain an edge in this series. Nick Martin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, like the ones you just heard from Nick, you can easily reference. Just follow Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And that's all for this Monday edition of Green Dot Daily. Once again, I'm Maria Marino, and I'll see you back here Tuesday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.